Coming at you from the OLR podcast studio.
It's really more of a basement.
Coming to you from the OLR basement studio.
But it's still a podcast.
Coming to you from the podcast basement studio.
Yeah, but you still need to say OLR.
Coming to you from the OLR podcast basement studio.
Oh, that's way too many words.
Coming at you.
That's not enough. You still need to say OLR.
Let's just start. It's OLR. Welcome to the show, everybody. This is Lucas, and tonight I'm running solo inside the podcast studio, but I do have a special guest for you tonight. Tonight I am talking to Nick Slatten. Nick is one of the men that was in the podcast of the Sean Ryan Show that I asked you to go out and listen to the other day. He's one of our soldiers that's come back from war. He got wrongfully convicted, got put into prison, and he got a pardon by President Trump. Nick is one of the nicest people that you will ever meet in your entire life. Has one of the craziest stories, a story that you couldn't imagine going through yourself, that I couldn't imagine going through myself. It's a terrifying that this could happen to somebody. But Nick is out. Everything's good. Every time you talk to Nick, how are you doing? I'm blessed. That's the only answer you get. Since he's out, he's got other brothers in the military that are going through a similar situation that he's advocating for. And tonight, he's got one man in particular that he's advocating for. His name is Calvin Gibbs. He's going to tell you a little bit about Calvin's story. Then we get into a little bit of Nick's story as well. And it's just such an interesting listen. There's things going on inside the country that you just wouldn't think that are going on, but they are. Anyway, I'm gonna quit rambling. I just want you to listen. I want to thank Nick so much for coming on tonight, talking to us, and telling us about this story. So let me shut up. Here it is, Nick Slatten. All right, tonight we're here with Nick Slatten. Nick, how are you doing, buddy?
Man, I'm blessed. How you doing, sir?
Well, I'm fantastic, and I've been wanting to do this with you for a long time, and I've kind of hinted around that I've had somebody I wanted to talk to, and I mentioned it to you back probably a few months ago. I didn't want to push it too hard. I didn't know where you were at with getting to talk, but after that, you did this fantastic interview with three of your three friends on the Sean Ryan Show, and I talked to everybody about that a few weeks ago. And so if everybody remembers a few weeks ago when I said one of the guys on the Sean Ryan Show, I knew him. This is him. This is the guy. So Nick, I'm proud to have you on, buddy. I can't tell you enough how thankful I am for you to come on and talk to us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. What I wanted to talk about tonight, all you listeners, I really appreciate all your support and prayers. We've got a guy that we're trying to get out of Leavenworth. He's a prisoner of war in his own country, same as I was. His name is Staff Sergeant Calvin Gibbs. So I'll give you a little background on Gibbs. He was charged with 3 murders. All 3 of the alleged victims had biometric data that proved that they were terrorists. But the thing is, his jury never got access to this biometric data. So they basically presented these guys as innocent victims, but they were actually Taliban. And the United States government knew that they were Taliban, and they never turned that fact over to his jurors.
Now, let me ask you this. So I did a little reading on it, not a lot, obviously not as much as you have, but, so he was charged with 3 people. And if you go charged with 3 premeditated murders, nonetheless. However, they have shown that one of the guys there was that they engaged him lawfully. One of the guys that they attacked, they lawfully engaged him and another guy, and the other 2, he wasn't even there. He played no part in their murders. Correct?
Absolutely. So
let's shootings.
Let's talk about the first one.
Right.
So the first charge that he's charged with was an active shooter. So basically, they were clearing out a village, and this member of the Taliban started opening fire on him and his squad. And so him and another member of his squad engaged this insurgent and killed him. And so the other member that was participating in that engagement was a potential witness for the government. However, when they interviewed this witness, they found that it didn't fit the narrative of their case, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they charged that man. His name was Wagman. They charged that man with murder as well, but they never took it to trial. So basically, they did not call him as a witness, and his defense lawyer never called him as a witness either. So there was an exculpatory evidence witness, basically a witness that would have helped him, that his jury never got to hear testify. And he was willing to testify that, yes, this man was actively engaging us, and we did what we had to do to survive. And then for the second and the third one, you're absolutely correct on that as well. He was over 500 meters away from the village. He was actually on a whole nother part of the village when those two were engaged and killed by other members of his platoon, and he showed up after the fact. And there were multiple witnesses that were not allowed to testify as well, that Calvin Gibbs wasn't even at the scene of those killings. So you've got 3 exculpatory explanations that his jurors were not allowed to hear. And, this case is very personal to me, obviously, because I was locked up for a crime I did not commit. And I spent 6 years and 2 months. And I always said, if the good Lord sees fit to let me out, and I find out there's anybody else in a similar situation, I'm going to do whatever I can do to get them out of there. And so that's why I'm coming on your program. I'm hoping that your listeners will reach out to Senator Paul Bailey.
Mm-hmm.
That's who we're going to start with. We're going to try to get something going in Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
And his number is 615-741-3978. So everybody listening, just call them and just let them know, we're trying to get these prisoners of war out of Leavenworth. Why does our country release Taliban? They've released 1,500 Taliban members. They've released terrorists out of Guantanamo Bay, but our men are still locked up in Leavenworth. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it makes absolutely no sense, and I don't want to take guesses as to what people's what their motives may be for things like this. I would hate to believe that it's all political. However, it's hard not to believe at some point that it's all political, especially with, like you were telling me the other day, and like you just mentioned right then, like how many people from the other side, Taliban members, have been released that committed more atrocities, more crimes than what this guy could have ever even perpetrated. Correct?
That's right. He an important fact about Gibbs is he was operating in what was called the Maywand district.
Mm-hmm.
I was never in Afghanistan myself. All my time was in Baghdad. So a lot of my friends that are in special operations, I sat down with one over the weekend to research for this, and Maywand is enemy territory. He said that if you are above the age of 14 to 65, you are an active member of the Taliban. He's like, it's historically a place where the Taliban has been. They fought the Russians there, back when Russia was in there, and they fought us there. And it's like just a hotbed for enemy activity. And the thing that's real sick about this case is they knew they were terrorists, and they still pursued Gibbs. And Gibbs, he goes up before the parole board every year, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the only way he can get parole is to admit that he did an illegal killing.
Mm.
And he won't do that. He said, I've made mistakes in combat, but I never executed anybody. I never murdered anybody. And so they deny his parole, and he goes back to his cell. But this man is a patriot. This man put his life on the line for this country, and we've got to do something to get him out. And so there's a resolution that Louisiana State Republican Committee has passed. So it's in the early stages, but we're trying to get Tennessee to do something similar. So basically, it's post-war amnesty for people like Staff Sergeant Gibbs, and then there's another member of the 82nd Airborne Division that just got in a gunfight in Syria not too long ago. We're trying to keep him from having to go through this nightmare of trials and courts and prison time. So
yeah. And so
there's a lot of.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I was just going to say there's a lot of people that that are locked up in Leavenworth and nobody knows their names. But Gibbs is my first priority because he's actually innocent, man.
Right.
The first guy he killed was an active enemy combatant. And then the other two, he wasn't even there. At least my situation, I was actually there, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
right.
He wasn't even there for two of those bodies. So it's insane, man.
Yeah, that's absolutely crazy. And I know you, in your case, you was actually in front of a civilian jury. Now, if he's in Leavenworth, how is that? It's probably not civilian, correct? His jury he went from?
That's right. He faced the military court martial, so it's basically
no jury whatsoever. Then it was just passed down.
There's jurors, but the way that they did it, they rigged it against them. It was at a infantry division, is where his court martial took place.
Mm-hmm.
But there were no infantrymen on his jury, so they took all these people that weren't combat soldiers and judged him. You know, none of his peers were on there. So it's kind of like my situation. I didn't have anybody that ever been shot at as my jury, you know, and his was even worse because he was actually at an infantry division. They could have just picked people from the infantry to set as his jurors, you know.
Uh-huh.
And they chose to pick the support personnel, people that had never been shot at, as part of his jury. So,
you know, it's with me as being a civilian, you know, I actively support our military as much as I would say I can, you know, and that I know how. And I empathize with you guys a lot as much as anybody can, but I just can't get my head around getting shot at. You know what I mean? It's like there's no way for me to, no matter how much I can try, I'll never be able to put myself in that situation. And I don't think that anybody can, regardless of their training prior to it, until you get into that situation. You have no way of understanding it. I just can't imagine there's any way to understand it.
Yeah, combat is terrible. And especially these guys, you know, our military, they were faced with the situation where they had to choose between a casket or a prison cell.
Mm-hmm.
So there's multiple times, like I saw in my time overseas in Baghdad, where soldiers would hesitate to shoot a vehicle and then they would get blown up. And, you know, you ask some of the people, why are they hesitating? And it's because they don't want to go to prison. So basically, if they get it wrong, the vehicle's not stopping for whatever reason. And it turns out that it's just somebody that their brakes went out or something like that, or somebody that wasn't paying attention, they go to prison.
Right.
So that these guys are like hesitating and getting themselves killed, or even worse, getting their boys killed, you know, and it's like, we have to do something about that. There is no way that our fighting men and women should have to choose between a casket or a prison cell. If we send them over there, we should have their backs 110%. And that's like, you know, I'm asking all the people that are listening to this, call Senator Paul Bailey and start advocating for Calvin Gibbs and do your own research. You know, there's all kinds of stuff out there about his case. And most of it is from the liberal press that just makes him look bad. But if you dig into this case for 5 minutes, it smells funny, right? You know that something's wrong with it.
Oh, yeah.
You know this dude's actually innocent.
Yeah, don't just read the first thing you come to. Dig in, read some more, because you can find the bad turn to it. You can find the part where he premeditated and killed and executed 3 people, right? You can find the narrative that he is a bad guy. He is the butcher of Baghdad, or, you know, or whatever you would call it. But then you read into the story and you go, oh, well, that's just the turn that they've put on this. There's more to this than that. He actually wasn't there for 2 of them, so how could he even premeditated those 2? And he was in a gunfight the other time that he didn't start, so how was he, you know, how did he premeditate that one, you know? So I don't know. There's a lot to it. There's a lot to it other than that first board or first I don't know, you know, first thing that the first person wrote about it. And unfortunately, a lot of people will stop at that first thing that they read, and it's not the whole story. I hate that. I hate that about it.
The problem I have with the press is I have never read an article about Staff Sergeant Calvin Gibbs that had the report of the biometric data. So there's 3 dudes that are dead, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they know they're Taliban. Why wouldn't you put that in your report?
Right. There's only one reason to not put it in there, right? It doesn't go with your narrative.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, if you're an investigative journalist, you didn't investigate very hard.
Yeah, that's not even a thing anymore, I don't believe. Is it the days of Walter Cronkite being on there making sure your news is right is far gone. You know, Paul Harvey's rest of the story? I mean, we don't get the rest of the story anymore. You know, we get the pretty headline that causes outrage. It gets people to click on it. And you know, and that's that divisive partisan journalism is the reason that our country is so divided right now. I have no doubt that politics has played a large role in it. However, those politics are being extremely exacerbated by this partisan political news that we get just inundated with.
Yeah, it's terrible, man.
Yeah, absolutely terrible.
Our men and women don't stand a chance. You know, when I was over there, you know, the rules of engagement were basically you get your boys home, you do whatever you got to do. But, you know, Gibbs, he was in Afghanistan under the Obama administration, you know, and under the Obama administration, they were afraid to shoot, you know, because if they got it wrong, like I said, you know, they're going to prison. And so this dude killed Taliban. And let's just say for a minute that like all 3 of those people were Taliban. So why is there this big uproar about these 3 military-age males that are members of a terrorist organization that are dead, you know? And why is that being withheld from the public? You know, I've been on this guy's case for 6 days. I've been researching it for 6 days. That's it. And I found the biometric data. So it's like, I mean, and I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a politician. So
right.
You would think that like people would care about this, you know, like, so I just encourage y'all, like I said, I can't say it enough. Call Senator Paul Bailey, call your U.S. congressman, your U.S. senator, write letters. You know, that's how we got out, you know.
Right.
We had all these people that just rallied behind us, man. And, you know, God is good. He delivered us from prison. You know, I was serving a life sentence. I was never going to get out. And President pardoned me. You know, President Trump pardoned me on December 22nd of 2020. And it's just, you know, I am so blessed. Like, I think every time I see you in class, you know, that's, I'm like, how are you doing?
Yeah.
And you ask me how I'm doing, and I'm like, I'm blessed.
Yeah, that's I was telling somebody the other day. I said that it's a beautiful thing to see somebody that's genuinely has been given their life back. That, you know, didn't necessarily think that they were ever going to get it back, because now every time that I see you, I say, "How you doing, buddy?" The only response you ever give me is, "I'm blessed. I'm blessed." And you know what? It's just such a beautiful thing, man.
Yeah, and I want to tell everybody that's listening, you know, no matter what you've got going on, God can fix it. You know, if you believe God created everything with a word, there's not anything you got going on that he can't handle. You know, according to man, I was supposed to die in prison, and God said otherwise. And, you know, I've got married. I've got a little baby girl on the way soon. So it's like all these miracles just keep happening, you know, and just trust in the Lord, and he'll direct your path.
I don't. For anybody who's not heard your backstory, other than what we've given right here, there's I've alluded to it a couple times. I've told you to go to it. Sean Ryan show gives the entire backstory of the whole incident, the whole reason that you were in prison, and how that went. And then I'm drawing a blank on what's the reporter's name. What's her name?
So it's the Sean Ryan show. It's episode number 11, and the reporter you're referring to she's an investigative journalist. Her name's Gina Keating.
Yeah, there you go. And she's just Gina Keating, she is not a conservative. She says she even comes out and says that she's a Democrat. She's a liberal, and she dug into this because she could smell that something was wrong with the story. So, don't take this from a conservative, the conservative me, if you want the other side of the story, you can listen to her side of the story, get her opinion on it. And so, I don't want to dig into that, but what I would like for you to, you just said a few things to me over time. Like you heard what you heard come out of the speakers while you're sitting in your cell, and and about just your turn to God. If you didn't care, I know that's highly personal, but if you didn't care, just share a little bit of that with people. Like, how did you turn to God?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I came back from the war, when I came back from Blackwater after this incident happened, I was really angry and bitter. I was drinking a lot. I was eating. They were prescribing me Xanax, so I was going down a real bad path. Basically, I just turned my back on God and I just did my own thing. And I was really quick to fight people. If I was extremely violent. Mm-hmm. And anybody that tried to love me, I just pushed them away and didn't want anything to do with them. I spent a lot of time in the woods by myself. And so I was in a bad way. And then, I got prosecuted. I got sentenced to life in prison. And the first day I was locked up, I was calling out to God. I had returned to Him because I was completely humbled. I was completely broken. Mm-hmm. Knowing that you're never getting out of prison is I can't even explain the feeling.
Oh, I can't imagine. I can't imagine the feeling.
So basically, when you get sentenced to life in prison, and all your friends and family get up there and speak on your behalf, trying to ask the judge not to impose this mandatory sentence that's going to basically, you're going to die in prison. They're trying to ask for leniency. It's like watching your own funeral. Mm. So you're not allowed to say anything. So you just sit there and you hear all these people say, this guy's done all this. He was a member of the 82nd Airborne Division. He served 2 tours in Iraq. He helped me. It was just even simple things like he helped me chop wood when he was little. He helped me, put a roof on my house, just stuff like that. And you're
right.
You're like, man, it's like I'm dead. So I'm locked up the very first night, and I'm calling out to God, and I'm just like, I didn't do this. And God basically just told me in my heart, He told me that you don't run this. I run this. And so I was asking, what am I supposed to do? And then I got a Bible and was reading it. He spoke to me through the scripture, and He said, love God and love your neighbor. So that's what I started doing. I started really just digging into His word and meeting Him daily. And He started shaving off all those bad pieces, all that hate, all that anger that I had stored up in me, all those grudges I had against the people that lied against me on the stand. He started shaving those pieces off. And then the incident you're talking about is the one that I spoke about on the Sean Ryan show. It's basically, my story is crazy long. So it's like I had to go to trial 3 different times. The first trial, they lied and hid evidence, and I won my direct appeal. God bless me. After about 3 years in prison, I won my appeal, and then it took another year for the trial to take place. So I've been locked up for 4 years already. I get a new trial. And then that jury hung. They couldn't reach a verdict. Some of them wanted to convict me, some of them didn't. So my lawyers asked me to take a polygraph. I agreed to it. I passed the polygraph, and then the prosecutors told me, they said, look, if you'll just plead guilty, we'll let you go home. And so I said, I'm innocent. I'm not going to take a deal. I'm not going to plead guilty. And so they had a third trial. And in the third trial, they basically just had their witnesses change their story from the second trial, which had happened a couple months before that. And so they had them lie again. And then it turns out they had hid all kinds of evidence as well. We found that later on. But I'm locked up again, sentenced to life in prison for the second time. And so I was in this little jail, and they had a riot in the jail. And so They broke the sprinklers. The prisoners did. They set the microwaves on fire. They ran the cops out of the unit. And so I just go to my cell. I get my Bible and I sit on my bunk and start reading it. One of my buddies, he saw me go in my cell, so he just comes by and shuts my door. And the cell is electronically locked after that, so they can only open it from outside of the unit. And my cellmate was caught out in it, so he was participating in the riot. So when the riot team came in, they threw flashbang grenades, they threw tear gas canisters, and they drug all the guys out that were participating in the riot. So after that, they were really mean to us. They didn't really feed us hardly anything for like 7 days. So they're bringing us trays so that it looks good for the camera, these styrofoam trays. But when they hand them through the slot in the door and you open up your tray, there was hardly any food on it. I'm talking like 3 bites of food. So we were hungry.
Yeah.
And I would read Psalms 91 every day. And verse 3 of Psalms 91 says, "Surely he will save you from the fowler's snare." And so after about 6 or 7 days of just starving, that really bothered me, that verse did. And I was calling out to God. I was basically yelling. I was like, I'm in the fowler's snare. Your word says you're surely going to save me from the fowler's snare. When are you going to do this? And then I heard out loud, this was the first time I'd ever heard God. And obviously at the time, I just thought I was going crazy. I heard out loud, there was a speaker in the cell, and it sounded like it had come over that speaker. It said, "Slatten, pack your stuff. You got a presidential pardon." And I was like, what? I was like, man, I'm going crazy. And so they let us out of our cells a couple of days later, and I called my sister. And she said, "Have you talked to anybody?" I was like, "No, I've been locked down for about a week." I was like, "They had a riot." She said, "Well, the New York Times reported that President Trump is considering pardoning soldiers accused of war crimes, and it mentioned you by name. So it was me, Gallagher, and Golston in the article. Those were the 3 names that it mentioned. And the article was released the same day that I heard the voice. And so immediately I was like, I told my sister, I was like, God told me that I'm going to get a pardon. And she's like, yeah, you're crazy, bro.
Yeah.
But there was no mention of pardons before that. It wasn't on anybody's radar. My attorneys, the good Lord bless me, I had like $10 million worth of lawyers came on my case for free to help me fight the second and the third case. And so they're connected all over Washington, D.C. And so now we got this political angle. So we were already appealing the last conviction, right? So now they got this whole effort to like advocate for us. And I told him, when I talked to Simon, I was like, look, I am not going to accept a pardon unless you pardon all of us, unless you can get Paul, Dustin, and Evan in on the pardon as well. And he was like, no, it's just you. That's your name is the only name in the article. And I'm like, you heard what I said. I'm not going to take a pardon unless it's all of us. And he's like, all right. And so everybody started campaigning for us. They started writing to their congressmen and senators and calling congressmen and senators. And I know that sounds like it don't work, but it does. Like if you get enough people pissed off about something, they'll get it done, right? And so then we had all this congressional support, and then Pete Hegseth, he came on and supported us. He was like one of our biggest advocates on television. Pete Hegseth is awesome. And so, yeah, I mean, President Trump, it was years later, it was a year and a half later after I heard the voice, but God fulfilled what he said. He said I was going to be pardoned, and I'd always, conduct Bible study there in that jail. And I'd always tell those guys, we'd pray at the beginning and at the end of Bible study, and I'd be like, I'm going to receive a presidential pardon in the name of Jesus, And I'm sure they're like, yeah, this dude's nuts.
Right.
But there was one kid that went through the whole year and a half with me, right? So he sat through the entire, and he actually got to hear me tell my story about hearing God, and then he actually got to see me leave. So he was crying, when I was like, I told you, man. I told you, God's faithful. So he got to see me pack my stuff and walk out of that jail. So it was just amazing, you know. So
What was that?
God is,
What was that feeling like when you walked out?
you know, I didn't feel any different. Like I felt blessed in there, and I feel blessed out here. Like I think that once you really surrender to God, and once you really you dwell in the shelter of the Most High, once you really link up with God every morning, you have peace that passes understanding. So it doesn't matter if you're facing death or if you're locked up in a jail cell. What matters is you've got that peace in your heart. And I think that, you know, I get that question a lot, you know, like, how does it feel? You know, what are you adjusting? You know, how do you feel? Like, I don't feel any different. I feel like that I'm just richly blessed, man.
That's a beautiful place to be in. I would.
Yeah, God is good.
Man, you got a crazy story. I appreciate you sharing it with us. Calvin Gibbs, give them the number and give them the senator's name again that they need to call. Reach out to him. What do we need to say when we call the senator? What do we need to tell him?
Just tell him that you're advocating on behalf of Staff Sergeant Calvin Gibbs. Senator Paul Bailey is who I would recommend calling first. His number is 615-741-3978. And then, like I said, you can call your U.S. congressman, you can call your U.S. senator, but we want to get it started on the state level. Louisiana has done something similar to it. So just basically say, we got all these guys locked up in Leavenworth that are sitting in our country as prisoners of war in their own country, and the government is releasing Taliban and people at Guantanamo Bay. We got to let our boys go, you know.
Mm-hmm.
However you want to say it, the more calls he gets, the more likely he's liable to do something. So I really appreciate y'all, man. Anything y'all can do, and pray. You know, like I said, that's the most important thing. We pray for Calvin Gibbs, and you just word of mouth, man. You just network and you tell people about Calvin Gibbs, and like we said, you know, do your own research.
Yeah, for sure. Don't do some research. Don't do the superficial reading. It's the next step down where you start sniffing that something's not exactly right with that first level story that you get to. Go ahead and I know some of your boys still have some legal issues or some payments to lawyers, and there's a place that we can go on and we can contribute and donate. Where would that be best at?
All right, so that is called the Pipe Hitter Foundation. So Eddie Gallagher started this foundation. He was a Navy SEAL that was falsely accused of war crimes as well. He ended up getting found not guilty. And so immediately when he got out of the Navy, he started a nonprofit organization. Every dollar that is donated goes directly to myself and my brothers. And we're trying to pay off Paul's legal bill first. Then we're going to do other fundraisers to pay off Dustin's. But this is Pipe Hitter Foundation, and it's pipehitterfoundation.org is the website. But you can just, there's a link on the Sean Ryan Show as well. If you go to Sean Ryan Show episode 11, there's a link on there as well.
Yeah,
we're called the Blackwater 4 on Eddie Gallagher's website, and the website is pipehitterfoundation.org.
And Eddie Gallagher, if anybody's interested in his story, it was very, very public whenever his came out. He also had an episode, I believe it was the one just prior to your episode on the Sean Ryan Show, maybe two before, but another very interesting story.
It's episode number 8.
Right, there you go. Okay. Yeah, it was another very interesting episode. Check that one out too. But go out and listen. You know, call your congressman. Nick, I appreciate you coming on so much, buddy. You know, thank you for your service. I don't know what else we can say to you, but thank you for your service.
Yeah, God bless you, man. Thank you for all you do. And thank you, everybody that's listening. Please help Calvin Gibbs. You know, let's pay it forward. Let's get this guy out of prison.
All right, everybody. That was Nick Slatten. Thank you very much. As always, thank you for listening. We love you. Love every one of you and all your beautiful smiling faces. Follow us on Facebook at One Lane Road Podcast, Instagram, Twitter, all those places. You can email us at onelaneroadpodcast@gmail.com if you have anything to say to us, or good, bad, or ugly. Give us a like, thumbs up, subscribe, all that stuff, everything that you can. Pass it along. It'd be one of the most important things. Don't just not just us. Pass along the story of Calvin Gibbs. Pass along the story of the Blackwater 4. I don't know. Let's get these boys home. All right, everybody. I appreciate you listening. Love you. Talk to you later.